We spent decades treating trauma only as something loud and visible that leaves a clear mark. But that leaves an entire category of hidden emotional suffering completely unnoticed from the outside.
Nobody writes a book about the birthday where everyone forgot, or the times you cried alone.
The things that consistently did not happen leave marks that are quiet and entirely hidden. Psychologists call this childhood emotional neglect, which is defined by an absence of proper attunement. When a child reaches out and nothing echoes back, and they conclude their own voice has no value. Children learn to understand their inner world through having it reflected back by someone else. A caregiver validating your sadness teaches your nervous system that internal states exist and matter. When that rarely happens, and you grow into an adult who is unable to identify what you feel. The clinical term Alexithymia means difficulty describing emotional states caused by an early absence.
Everything felt muted then, except for the quiet persistence of the pulse. He found himself drawn to its steady rhythm, a small comfort in the silence. People assume you are fine because presenting as fine was a childhood survival skill you mastered. This leaves a persistent sense that everyone else has access to a frequency you cannot reach. It is not depression or anxiety, but a flat experience of life lived behind glass.
You grow up invisible and begin sabotaging relationships just when connection starts to feel real. When given a compliment, you deflect it because receiving care feels like an unsafe debt. If love was unpredictable, growing up, your nervous system stops counting on it entirely.
So you became someone who does not need anyone and handles everything entirely alone.
Pure self-reliance looks strong, but it is just a very old, buried coping mechanism. Emotional needs do not just leave, and they simply stop making noise when no one responds. A recent review shows that compulsive self-reliance is heavily linked to early avoidant patterns. This emotional neglect remains one of the least studied forms of developmental pain. The invisible wound is the one we spend the least time trying to understand. He had waited patiently for the signal, knowing that the smallest light could lead to the greatest change.
The kid who went quiet or became funny learned it was the only way to stay safe.
You leaned heavily on the only tools available, and you did so remarkably well.
But we do not automatically drop our armor just because we left the old environment.
Your body still flinches and struggles to hear emotions through a thick wall.
Luckily, this is not permanent, because the brain is highly capable of healing.
Healing is slow and involves mourning the absence of things that should have been there.
How do you process a heavy feeling with no particular childhood memory attached to it?
It starts by deciding that your own internal experience is worth taking seriously.
Just because no one showed up, then, does not mean you were not worth showing up for.
Start by noticing you are angry and sitting with it instead of pushing it down. Catch yourself brushing off a compliment and actually pause to ask yourself why. Small moments of paying attention to your inner world change everything over time. This does not change overnight, but every honest check-in shifts something inside.
For someone who grew up unheard, learning to hear yourself is the whole point. If you are scrolling at midnight and feel a quiet recognition, pay attention to it.
That recognition is your nervous system finally doing what it never learned properly.
It is echoing something back to itself. Your sound was always worth echoing.
Stay with Simply Human Psychology for more hidden corners of human behavior.